Hello and welcome to Dungeoneered, a podcast dedicated to discussing Dungeons and Dragons. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Josh.
Let's do this. So Josh, today I do know what the topic is, which is my bird. As she screams.
Yes, your bird's like, it's me. I am definitely the topic.
That's the story of my life. She's the center of everything. But anyways, it's some sort of, something from Dragon Age, I think you were talking about?
Yeah, this week it's going to be a little different than how we normally do it. But this was kind of in our plan when we were creating the show and thinking about what it would be about. We didn't want to limit ourselves to just talking about D&D because there are so many other sources of inspiration that you can find than just D&D lore. So now that we've kind of had a good few episodes kind of getting down our style, now we're going to try branching out a little bit. And so we're going to start with this game, Dragon Age, and we're going to start with a kind of group. It's a belief system in that game called the Qun, but it's so much more than that. And we will talk about that. And in the future, we might talk about famous events, or it's wide open what we could talk about in the future. Just anything that inspires us to do something about the game.
I've never played Dragon Age before, any of the games, so I don't know. Like, at least with D&D, I have like a little bit of a reference or a framework for like, fighting a monster and its stat block. But I know nothing about Dragon Age. I don't even know what you do in Dragon Age or how it's played. I don't even think I've ever like watched a video on Dragon Age. So
yeah, well, it's an RPG, and I'm gonna go into kind of what it is, just in case some of our audience has never even heard about it. And so, Dragon Age is this wonderful RPG made by a company called BioWare. BioWare has a lot of pedigree when it comes to role-playing games. They made the very successful Mass Effect, and they made Dragon Age. That was their two main successful things that they do. They also do the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, that online game.
Oh, I used to play that a long time ago.
Now, Dragon Age has had 3 full installments and 1 large DLC-like half installment called Dragon Age Awakening that is sort of a continuation of the first game. The first game came out in 2009 and follows a group called the Grey Wardens. They are an ancient order of legendary warriors specifically trained to fight off an apocalypse that happens every few centuries, called the Blight, where creatures called Darkspawn spew from their underground burrows and try and destroy the world. And they kind of look like demons, and so it's kind of like this underground demon invasion that happens every few centuries. And the second game that came out in 2011, it follows the Hawk family as they flee from the Blight. This is a different Blight than the one that happens in the first game. Actually, no, they're fleeing from the one from the first game. It's cool because it kind of relates that way.
Do you ride skateboards in Dragon Age?
It's a fantasy game.
Oh, but it's the Hawk family. You know,
oh gosh, you're ridiculous. That was terrible. That was a terrible joke. You should be ashamed.
Oh man. Now you're gonna play Dragon Age and think about Tony Hawk.
The Blight was sweeping the nation. I am definitely going to think about Tony Hawk when I play. It's sweeping the nation. They come from Ferelden, and they go and run to this city called Kirkwall.
Skateboard to the city, you mean?
They skateboard to the city of Kirkwall, where they are refugees, hoping to meet up with some noble family they have there. But when they get there, they quickly learn that things aren't going to be as easy as they hoped. Now, the third game that came out in 2014 follows the Inquisition, a new organization forced into creation by the destruction of peace talks between Templars and mages. Now they must bring the world together before a different demon invasion destroys everyone. Now, each of these games are very different in their kind of locations, and so the things that you have to deal with and the kind of scale of it are so different in each different game that there is a huge variety of inspiration any DM can get for any type of game, whether it's like we talked about last week, where it's a Civil War game, or it's this huge campaign where at the end of it, you stop a demon invasion. Like, there is stuff to take from it all over the place. But one of the things that BioWare is so good at, and why it has 2 super successful RPGs under its belt, their writers are incredible at creating fantasy worlds. And they're just so beautiful. All the cultures and everything and how it all fits together. It is a masterclass in fantasy worlds and creating them.
Yeah, I literally know nothing about Dragon Age. So I wouldn't know.
Yeah. So in Dragon Age, they have classic fantasy races, humans, dwarves, and elves. Just the real basic. There's no gnomes, there's no halflings, there's no anything like that. It's just human, dwarves, and elves. But they also decided to add a unique race that is 100% their own called the Qunari. And the easiest way to describe a Qunari for people who play D&D like us, they're like Goliaths with Minotaur or Tiefling-like horns. Now, the reason why I say Minotaur or Tiefling-like horns is because some of them look exactly like the horns of a Minotaur, and others of them are kind of curled back like Tieflings, and so it's kind of, they can be all different shapes, their horns. Now, the Qunari are very different from Goliaths, though. They're very standoffish to other races, because most of them live their lives under this Qun, and Qun, it's kind of, it's not really a religion, it's not really a government, it's this weird combination of the two, and also moral code.
It's a lifestyle.
It really is. And it is this thing that mandates most aspects of their life. The Qun transcends borders, and people can be living under the Qun. They can be like your neighbor in Kirkwall, and they still live in Kirkwall. They still have a job and do whatever in Kirkwall. So it's like a religion in that way, but it's also like a government in other ways, where they have spies and they have all these things that are kind of, it's very weird, but also very interesting.
So it's a religion and a government and I guess religions have
kind of moral code to live by.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's like the Catholic Church type thing, like old Catholic Church.
Yeah, I guess that would be
they were the government.
Yeah, that's a good historical way, where there's places where they are the government, but there's also places where they're just it's just you're a Catholic living in Ireland or whatever. Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. Now, there's a lot of complicated stuff when talking about the Qunari and their beliefs about themselves. Simply, I will put it that Qunari is the term for the race that the wider world uses. And most Qunari would consider themselves Qunari. But Qunari specifically means people under the Qun. And so Qunari that reject the Qun are called Tal-Vashoth. And if a Tal-Vashoth is called a Qunari, the Qunari hate it. And most often the Tal-Vashoth will correct you, because even those who reject the Qun respect it still and understand its purpose. Now, what the writers of Dragon Age have done so wonderfully with this group and belief system in the games is there is so much built into it about secrecy and limiting the knowledge that all of its members have and whatnot. And so they purposely make it vague, but they do it and give you just enough that you're so intrigued by it and you so want more. And it's a really good thing to do if you don't have time to create this huge and think about every single belief that this group will have, or every single thing that they hold important. By keeping it vague and keeping it kind of trickling information in, you can really create this suspense and interest with your players of, I want to know more about this, but also keeping it to yourself. And there's a fun to it when you have knowledge that your players don't, and kind of teasing them with it. And it really just makes the world feel richer without you having to do all that more work.
Totally. And your players can make some of it up for you.
That's true. They can also, if they're having a meeting, thinking about it, and they're kind of talking in between the characters, best time to take some of their ideas when they're throwing it about, maybe it's this way or maybe it does this. I've gotten some great ideas from my players while they're like thinking over a situation, and you're like, that's actually a much better end to the game than what I was thinking for this mission or whatever. And you're like, taking that.
That is yep, that's mine. Yoink.
That's exactly what I was planning the whole time. Yes.
Aren't you guys so smart?
Yeah, that's another thing. It makes them feel smart, even though they came up with it technically. Now, the Qun is many things. It's a philosophy, a set of laws, a legislative guide, a social architecture to govern, and much more. A major point of the Qun is that everyone is good at something, and they must be utilized in that position and trained for that position. People are only taught and trained for the position that the Qun demands of them, and they only learn the parts of the Qun that affect that position. So from early on in life, they are it's figured out, what are you best at? And everybody has a role to play in the society, and everybody must play their role or society crumbles. And so they have this very strict structure that honestly a lot of people are into. Having a knowing your place at all times and knowing what you must do. Some people find that very comforting.
Is it like you pick your calling and then you delve deeper into your calling? Like if your calling is farming?
It 100%. Like I don't know. That's some of the stuff that they haven't really told us, but it's definitely like either it's a test or like we don't know exactly how, but it is chosen for them. Like they test their aptitude and they're like, okay, clearly you're going to be a really good spy. So we're going to train you to be a Ben Hasselroth, which is like their spies. Or you're really good.
Ben Hasselhoff?
No, it's a Ben Hasselroth.
Ah, yes. David's brother.
Oh, gosh. You've got really bad puns today, my friend.
I'm all over the place right now. Yeah, it's pretty.
You really are.
Yeah, it's all those Ben Hasselhoffs are going to be skateboarding all the way to their city, you know, with the Hawk family.
Now, these roles appointed by the Qun are incredibly important.
I love how you just continue.
I gave a long sigh, and then I'm just going to keep going.
You just continue on.
Now, these roles appointed by the Qun are incredibly important. Whether they are spiritual leaders, Arashocks, or a baker, they must do their job with the same care and precision, or the rules of the Qun pretty much suggest that society will crumble if everyone does not do their part and do it perfectly.
Did you say Arashock?
Arashock, yeah. It's like their spiritual leaders.
Ah, is there an Aerosmith?
Okay, Aaron, this is ridiculous.
Okay. Continue, please.
Now, my favorite moments interacting with members of the Qun are when I meet a Qun convert. Because we know all of these rules about how strict the Qun is and how they kind of rule and how they do all these things. And so you meet these people and you're like, why? Why did you think this is where I want to be? And this is where BioWare just really hits a home run, that they have thought it out so thoroughly that every member that you meet that's a convert, they're vague about it as well, but they give you enough info about why they chose to do it that you're like, that totally makes sense. Like, this person was just in this point in their life where becoming a part of the Qun totally made sense. And it's so beautiful to see, and it's this beautiful storytelling.
So, is there like a god that influences this? Like, it's their culture?
Just a belief system. It's based on the person's name was Ashkari Khoslan, and this person.
So it's based off of like a person's.
Yeah, so it's based off a book that they wrote, where it's kind of a code of honor system, that thing that they wrote, where they're like, it deals with a lot of metaphors.
It's like a person's philosophy.
Kind of. Here, this is like one of their parables that kind of explains how he came about writing this thing. When the Ashkari looked upon the destruction wrought by Locust, He saw at last the order in the world. A plague must cause suffering for as long as it endures. Earthquakes must shatter the land. They are bound by their being. Ashi Taleb, it is to be. For the world and the self are one. Existence is a choice. A self of suffering brings only suffering to the world. It is a choice, and we can refuse it. And so he came from his society that was just kind of in ruins, and nobody was happy, and he saw these locusts, or he saw these other things, whatever the myths say, and he just saw the order in it, and he's like, if everybody has their part, nobody's angry at each other, these locusts are all working together. And so he wrote this book, and it just was so meaningful to the Qunari people. They're like, that it kind of helped set their society straight. And so they all started working together again, and people were happy instead of killing each other and whatnot. And so they were just like, we should keep doing this. And it kind of just took off into a religion thing, governmental system that it is today.
So he was kind of like a philosophical leader.
Yes,
he was. Everybody kind of banded around him.
Yeah. Ashkari are like the spiritual leaders, or like the magi's of the Qun.
And so they don't believe in like a god. They believe in like the man who wrote the book. And they believe like, is there like inherent value in his philosophies?
Like, he's not a deity to them. He's just, his words are meaningful, and they believe that the world is a better place if everyone has a place in it, everybody has a job to do, everyone gets fed, everybody does, like, society works perfectly if we're all working together type thing. And it's one of those ideas that's like, yes, in a perfect world, that would be perfect. that would be a wonderful society if everybody was happy with that, but that's just not how things are. And so that's why they have people like Tal Vashoth and stuff, people that go against it, because it's not for everyone living this kind of very structured, you're forced to be this, you do this for the rest of your life, and you become a master at this and this alone.
Yeah. I guess probably a lot of people would be upset that their chosen task in life, like goal in life, is chosen by like a philosophy or a book or like a group of people. Be kind of annoying.
Yeah, and so that's kind of where a lot of the people that have left the Qun are kind of at in their life. They're angry and they're there. But other than that, like this Qun has does a lot of good for a lot of people. And it does try, it seems, this is a lot of the stuff that we kind of have as like hearsay, or we're trying to figure it out based on what knowledge we have, but very little is actually told about it in the game. But it seems like they try to pick their job kind of based on what they would want and what they're good at. And so even though it might not be something that it's not the thing you 100% wanted, it'll at least be somewhere up there. At least they try.
Yeah, like it's something you're good at, because it would be counterproductive to pick something you're terrible at, and then you have to do that for the rest of your life. It would be pretty bad for society.
Yeah. And overall, it doesn't matter what job someone has. There are things that are expected under the Qun. To be strong, disciplined, and stoic. And completing the job set before you by the Qun is like paramount. Because they believe that if the Qun says this is what you're doing, and it 100% says you will be successful here, then not succeeding there, whether going back to D&D, you were gift tasked with taking out mind flayers. If you fail at that, that's the worst, because the Qun said you were going to be successful. So the only point of failure is you. You were the thing that was wrong there. And so it's very harsh on failing tasks set forth by the Qun.
Well, that's kind of rough.
Yeah.
Not going to lie. It kind of reminds me a little bit of, in one of the books that I'm reading, it's like they pick a calling through their church, and then they do that for the rest of their life. So my calling is to be a historian type thing, or my calling is to be a farmer, or like my calling is to be this, and then they work for the betterment of society to fulfill that calling.
Mm-hmm.
but it's based off of like a philosophy and not a god. So like a man who wrote down his philosophies in a book.
Yeah.
And it's left mostly like that throughout the game, like just vague, like you don't really know much about it.
Yeah, because even in the only game you were able to play as a Qunari, which they're one of my favorite races, so I'm glad I finally got to play as them. In the third game, you are a Talvashoth who was not raised in the Qun, so even that character doesn't get to talk about it very much, but you do talk about it a little because you do a person joins your team who is a part of the Qun in Inquisition, and so you talk with him a lot about his experiences and whatnot, and even he has a lot of freedom in life for what he's doing, and he has he runs a mercenary company, but he's still a part of this Qun, and so there's this interesting kind of points where we can learn stuff about the Qun, and through him is how we meet one of the converts, which is one of my favorite characters, this elf convert to the Qun.
So then his, like, to use that example, his calling, I guess, for lack of a better word, was to be a mercenary. But
no,
the church / government gave him that calling to be a mercenary.
Anybody who's listening who wants to play the game, this is a small spoiler here. He is a Ben Hasselhoff, so he's a spy for the Qunari.
Got it.
Yeah, so he's a
Hasselhoff.
That's why he has a lot of freedom, is because he's this spy, and so he kind of uses his mercenary company to kind of get close to people and whatnot. And so he offers his mercenary company to join you. His name's Iron Bull.
Got it.
And he's actually voiced by Freddie Prinze Jr., which is pretty cool.
Not David Hasselhoff?
No. And so...
Just no?
No, just no. And so he's a great character. And his whole mercenary group are... The Chargers are great. Now, all these ideas that are... I'm sorry, podcast listeners. Now, all these ideas are set forth as examples of their core beliefs, which are to bring balance to the world and have power over it. You must first have power over yourself and mastery of something. A lot of their Qun is written in parables and metaphors and kind of flowery language in such a way that there is some room for interpretation a lot of times. Now, there's a parable that was kind of written about the world and how they kind of see the world. A great Ashkari, during his travels, came upon a village in the desert. There he found houses crumbling, the earth so dry and dead that the people tied themselves to each other for fear a strong wind would carry would carry the ground from under their feet. Nothing grew there except the bitter memory of gardens. The Ashkari stopped the first man he saw and asked, "What happened here?" Drought came and the world changed from prosperity to ruin, the man told him. "Change it back," the Ashkari replied. The villager became angry then, believing the Ashkari mocked him, for no one would simply change the world at a whim. To which the Ashkari answered, "Then change yourself. You make your own world." And Qunari see it as their duty to, quotation marks, educate those who do not comprehend the Qun. And they seem standoffish, as I said earlier, to the world, because when they interact with it, they are entering the world with this kind of air of hatred and disgust for people that are outside of the Qun. Now, not all Qunari show that or kind of act out on that, but some do, definitely. Because the Qun teaches that the Qun is their only truth for morality, and all societies that reject it are living in debauchery and suffering. Now, this philosophy has led to the Qunari being very militaristic and expansionistic, because they believe to bring those societies to the Qun is to liberate them from their own self-inflicted torment.
Nice. Classic.
I'm doing this for your own good. I'm killing you and your family for your nation's own good.
Don't worry. Yeah, don't worry. I'm here to restore your morals by killing you.
Yeah, it's even said that the Qunari attempt trades with other nations primarily to assess potential opponents.
So they are like super militaristic then.
Yeah, they're very so like in throughout the game so far. We've heard a few times that the nation of Ferelden and has a treaty when they kind of destroyed the Qunari and pushed them back to the north where they live. That they kind of came up with a peace treaty, said, "Hey, we'll both stay on our sides. Don't attack us again." And in the very first game, you get a Qunari ally, which this is actually really interesting. They hadn't perfected what they believed and wanted a Qunari to be. So at that time, he just looks like a large humanoid. That's all he is. He's just a large human, it looks like. His name's Sten. And so they've now modded, there's mods you can get to kind of make him look more what the future games made Qunari look like.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's kind of a cool concept.
It is. But so he says constantly that is just a flimsy piece of paper, and as soon as they have their forces up, they're going to attack again. It does not mean anything. They signed a piece of paper because it makes you feel comfortable. That's it. And so Ferelden is a huge nation that's very powerful. And so just this blatant, like, we just signed it to make you feel comfortable is a huge statement.
I mean, it also makes sense that they're, like, really strong militaristically because, like, they have to gain mastery over it. Like, the people who are chosen to be...
Oh, yeah. If you're chosen to be a fighter,
military,
yeah.
Yeah.
If you're chosen to command, if you ever fail, you are heavily punished for it because the Qun said you should have succeeded.
Yeah, and you have to gain mastery over it in order to control, you know?
Yeah.
That'd be not a fun society to fight.
Yeah. Now, my idea for what we could talk about this week was making a theocracy. Now, one thing I wanted to say to start this off was that I don't like saying this, but I'm an artist, so I like drawing and stuff. So when I start creating my world, I start with a drawing of the continent. Like, this is what the kind of shape that I want. And after I'm done with that, then I do a rough kind of suggestion of where I think the nations will kind of, what their shapes will be and whatnot on there. And then the next step I do is I decide arbitrarily, really, which nation, like what governments I want each one to be. Like, this is a democracy, this is a monarchy, this is a theocracy, and stuff like that. And a tip that I've heard in literally every art class I've ever had, which is a lot of them, creativity is increased exponentially when there are boundaries. So when you have a task, and it's not just draw something, you're going to have a harder time finding something to draw than if it was like, draw something from life, draw an apple, draw this. Like, you're going to be more creative inside that than you are with just freedom. And so like what we're going to be doing here, picking theocracy is what we're going to talk about, then you have, there's going to be more creativity there than there would be if you were just like, what should the government, what should the society of this place be? Just pick something, whether it has to be around this or that. Just pick it and then kind of be creative in that boundary, and it's going to work way better.
Yeah, so I think that for this, we should do, like you said, making a theocracy, but to follow the Qunari, make it around one man and his philosophies, kind of like how they did in Dragon Age, to kind of like bring it into the D&D realm.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, we can do that.
So I think how we should start is, like, if you were going to do this, if you wanted to take the Qunari and kind of put them, at least their basic concept and idea, into a D&D world, I think the first thing you'd have to do is create the person who started this. So, for example, in the Qunari, it's David Hasselhoff. No, that's a spy. Never mind. Those are spies. It's it's one of the it's the guy you're talking about.
If you want to do a joke, like, it's Agent Coulson from
no
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
True.
It's Oshkari Kosloon.
Yeah. So, like, we'd have to first make a man, essentially, who kind of like helmed this philosophy, who like spurred this nation into what it is today.
Who's the person that started this? Which I kind of like the name Oshkari is kind of like, or we could just do it like Magi or something. But this kind of name for a wise person that people know are wise, that then just something about what they believe just takes off.
Yeah, so you could. We could depend. We could if we wanted right now. Do you want to like go and make somebody like this? Do we want to do that?
Let's go for it. Let's do it.
All right, that's kind of a daunting task. To make a person who's like a
I know,
philosophy.
but we're literally asking the. We're
totally.
literally suggesting for the listeners to do it. Why don't we do it?
Yeah. All right. So step one. What do we want this philosophy to be about? What was this person's philosophy?
Freedom.
What was freedom?
Freedom.
So
freedom, kind of like a chaotic character. So like, if you put chaotic as their alignment, that kind of thing, like that kind of chaos, where there's still people that are chaotic that can be rulers of nations or whatnot.
I have a fun idea. So D&D is like heavily inspired by gods and like the spiritual. Why don't we make somebody whose philosophy was freedom from the gods? So no gods, no religion, nothing. He wanted pure freedom from the rule of gods in D&D.
No gods, only man.
It's in D&D.
Andrew Ryan D&D, from BioShock.
Yeah, okay. I'm just going.
No gods, only man.
No, so in D&D it's like impossible not to believe in gods because you have clerics who are literally like blowing stuff up, and gods who are walking around on on the material plane. So it's like impossible not to believe in gods. But the concept would be freedom from
through
the gods.
Self-reliance.
Yes. So a society who has developed their morals, their ideologies, their way of life around not following the gods.
Yeah.
Because that is a very different society than what we see in almost all of D&D, really, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So, in your opinion, what would a society look like in D&D following a philosophy of men don't need the gods?
Well, so I would start with self-reliance. So think about the kind of daily needs that everybody has: shelter, food, water, and then kind of expand a little bit from there and kind of decide what period we want it to be in. Is this going to be industrialized, or are we going to still be back in kind of medieval fantasy? Because even then we could have some sort of coal or some sort of thing and just have them try to be as self-reliant as possible. And maybe the point of the campaign could be they're reaching a point where they can't anymore, where they're like, oh no, we don't have the resource to keep up, like the Industrial Revolution, where Britain had this huge amount of coal. And so because they were able to become so self-reliant during that time, that they just expanded beyond anybody else because they had just this huge surplus of this thing that was all of a sudden the most important thing in the world.
Yeah. So this society has formed off the idea that people can be self-reliant and self-sufficient without the need or help from the gods. Mm-hmm. And so they have formed this nation in order to create a successful, thriving humanity without the need or interference of gods. And so
would this be a socialist society where they kind of they together try to provide medicine and food, and together as a group try to bring this self-reliance?
Well, you could do either. You could do like a rugged individualist society where, because they don't believe in any kind of like religious structure or hierarchy, that they just are all individuals. So you actually walk into a country that is wild, essentially, like just wilderness, and there's just rugged individuals who have their own little compounds, like all over.
Well, how would that, thinking of keeping it as a nation, how would that keep its borders if everybody was kind of far away from each other? Would there be some sort of a called upon militia, kind of a running through on a horse calling, the British are coming when something is happening? Or how would that work?
How I'd picture it is probably like a feudal society. So you have like vassals underneath a lord who's underneath, a king, that whole kind of structure, where everybody is the problem is with a feudal society is that all like the peasants are working together to produce for the lord. So
yeah,
to me,
it's not that self-reliant.
No, to me it would be probably because it's so different than anything that we would see today. It'd probably just be like a bunch of individuals who, when they see something go wrong, they grab their pitchforks and their guns, or they grab their swords and their shields, and they defend their land. So it would probably be a place that would be pretty easy to take over if you wanted. So you'd have to probably form. Why wouldn't a nation take it over?
I think because I still want it to be its own nation. So I think the idea of that, where it is super easy to take over, but the people are unruly, and if you try to rule over them, it would be incredibly difficult, and they will probably revolt at some point. And so there's
Right,
kind of
because of
this history of ruling just does not work over these people, that they have just kind of
Yeah.
stopped trying.
Yeah, well, because of this reliance, this individualism, it has actually created a bond between the people who live there of individualism. So when another nation
Yes.
tries to take it over, they actually come together as a single unit to defeat and disband what is trying to take them over. So this
Yeah.
the self-individualism has this kind of opposite effect where they become a collective when the time is needed. So they have formed this whole philosophy on self-reliance and individualism, but when the time is called for, they rise up and are able to defeat, or at least try to defeat, something that tries to take them over. And like you were saying, if they did get taken over, it would be like, they are completely against any form or any rule that is over them. And so they become this essentially like militia or like rebels that are constantly being unruly within society because they are following the rules and laws laid before them of self-reliance, which would be
cool.
really interesting. It'd be so hard to run in D&D.
It would. It would be a really weird thing to run.
So different.
Well, no, I think it wouldn't be too hard to run. It would just be too hard to make a thing, make important, or make like a big deal out of it, because there wouldn't be some king to ask them to help or something unless they were currently being taken over and we saw them as their huge militia. Otherwise, it would be hard to make it important. Which maybe
a
that
story
is
hook within the nation would be pretty hard to do.
I mean, maybe. Well, I think you could do a story hook, as in like you have to talk to one of these individualists, and they have something, or it's a magic shop or something that you have to like.
Well, here's another idea.
Yeah.
What if we went not a nation, but like a group of I was almost
nomadic
thinking like
tribes?
A group of like nomadic, like Ronin, like individuals that follow all throughout the world, this self-reliance individualism. And so when the party is going through an actual nation, they meet a few of these members that are just scattered all throughout the world, that are connected to this one person who believed you don't need gods to be successful, and that self-reliance and individualism.
And so they're trying to spread it like a religion, but there is no god that they worship.
Right. And so they're trying to spread this idea of self-individualism. There is no nation because that's not self-reliance or individualism. There's only the individual. And so they are, it probably wouldn't be like a big bad guy, a big bad evil guy or anything like that, but it would be a fun, like...
they could definitely help. You could definitely run into them.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe there's a lot of them that are mercenaries, which I think it is that way. And at least sometimes it seems that way, that a lot of the like mercenaries are like Qunari, because they're these huge people like Goliath in D&D, where it's like, this dude looks like he could mess you up, and you're like, I'm gonna hire you as a mercenary because no one's gonna mess with me then.
Yeah, I could also see like the weird wizard, who the party has to talk to gain, like insights or wisdom. This self-individual, this, on his own farmstead, who has like an alchemy garden, like that kind of stuff, where he's like out in the middle of nowhere, who's following these tenets of self-reliance and individualism.
Yeah, he's got it all.
These weird,
all his self-reliance is there on that farm.
And you could also even play off of like, they make the best assassins. So like they could be like, because they follow the tenets of self-individualism and self-reliance, these like people become the best assassins because they don't have anybody to answer to but themselves. So they go for their own gain and their own money and they don't have any ties or connections to anything because they believe in this self-reliance. And then they have goals to like bring down structures, so like governments. So we don't believe in this collective, this community. And so we at all costs are trying to liberate you from this community so that you can experience the true freedom of individualism. So they go and kill like
so are
leaders,
they actually going to like try and
yeah, so they
free
assassinate
people
and kill
from
kings.
communities?
Yeah, so they kill leaders of religions and governments to help people experience what it would be like to have individualism and not feel
what I'm thinking about
a nation.
Now, what I'm thinking about here is playing a character that is one of these individualists, and they just, the very first thing is they're just a mercenary that takes a job, and then they kind of like grow a connection to these people, and they kind of have to deal with it personally. Like,
yep,
this is a group I'm a part of. What? How do I deal with this? And then like maybe even like what you were saying, maybe like their brother or their sister is still one of these individualists, and they see the party with their relative, and they're like, oh no. And they go to try to kill the party to give him the freedom that's what they try to do.
Yeah, and I think it would be really fun for the party to get these like story hooks of the king of, X nation has been assassinated and killed. And there's rumors and worries that this assassin is coming this way to, kill other kings and other rulers. And so the party's been tasked and hired by a guild or a religion or a government to find and track down this assassin. Yeah, or the king nearby to track down this assassin before he's killed. So you have this like, again, not a nation, not a group of people, but just individuals who are following these tenets, and they are trying to liberate everyone from this hierarchy structure by killing those in hierarchies.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Because that's like way different than anything you find in D&D.
Yeah, and they're like statted in such a way that they're always good at taking on big groups because they always know they're going to be alone.
Right, and so they're, you give them like legendary actions and all sorts of fun stuff like that, or actions for disengaging and running away from people and all sorts of different stuff like that. But it'd be a really fun, I think it'd be a really fun and interesting group of people that follow these tenets to make, because that's so unlike anything that I've really ever made in D&D, that's for sure. I've never made a group of people whose like their sole purpose is to force individualism on people.
Yeah.
And that could just be a really fun, you might be able to make it a full campaign, but it'd be a really fun story arc, that's for sure. Where maybe even early in the campaign, they meet one of these people who's traveling through a town of some sort, and shares with them philosophies that he follows. And even maybe even the party could even become friends with him, and he won't follow them or go with them because of his individualistic philosophies. Yeah. So you can slowly put that throughout your world, just slowly until they get to the king, where the king wants to hire them because he's afraid that one of these, you'd have to find a cool name, but one of these assassins is coming to kill him to remove the hierarchical structure that he's a part of. Yeah. To force individualism on his people, to give them true freedom. That'd be fun.
That would be cool. Yeah, you're right. I don't think this could be a full campaign, but honestly, I don't think you always have to have. I don't think every thing in your world has to be possible to be a full campaign.
No, I don't either. But it could easily lead to something of a full campaign, because you could have one of these assassins kill, a group of people who are protecting an ancient ritual or seal that would unleash a god. Or one of these assassins is looking to release a god for destruction, so that everybody is forced because of the destruction to become individuals.
Yeah, that's good. I had in my Piranu campaign that I plan to run, the idea that kind of will start a bigger thing, which is, it's not going to be the final thing, it's not going to be the big bad, but there is this Shadowfell kind of portal that has been opened to kind of try to flood the world with these Shadowfell creatures that is constantly being protected in Piranu. And I thought that would be a fun thing to have like near the beginning of the campaign, something happens and stuff gets through. And having an individualist, or whatever we're going to call it, take them out would be, I think that's what I'm going to do, because that's super cool.
Yeah, no. I think it's a really fun concept.
And has an issue, has unforeseen consequences.
And you could even play it where this individual is also torn about doing this because he's releasing the Shadowfell, to destroy the world.
I kind of like the idea of them just
which
thinking
isn't individualism.
I like the idea of them thinking so. I like the idea of them thinking so straight towards individualism and I must free the people, that this is just a consequence they didn't even think about, because kind of in my world it's not known. Like, they kind of know something's over there, but they don't know what. And so he's just going to go in to do his task, not knowing that this is the consequence. Like, this is the mage that is the number one in stopping this from happening, or this is the king that is needed to do something to stop it, or whatever he takes out. It's an unforeseen consequence, which is, I always like having because every villain thinks they're a hero. I mean, there are some that are exceptions, but the majority of them think they're doing the right thing. And so having there be this, they become the villain, quotation marks, because they didn't plan fully, is a really fun way of kind of creating that this person wasn't trying to be a villain when they caused this.
Yeah. And you could even, with something like this like advanced rugged individualism, where a person's going around freeing people from hierarchical tyranny or any kind of hierarchy, is you can even have the party have fun roleplay aspects of like talking to this guy about how working together as a team or as a party is better in some ways than individualism. And so you can have a whole entire roleplay session where they might even be able to convince this assassin that, releasing some sort of demonic demon, devils or demons into the material plane would cause more harm than good, and that by doing this you're causing not individualism but the opposite, with the devils and demons that are going to band together to kill the material plane. So
yeah,
it could be just a fun back and forth roleplay that you could do too, between this person who's trying to do this evil that he doesn't see as evil because he's freeing people from their hierarchies.
Yeah, and I think it would be interesting with an individualist, because one of their major ideals would be that every life is important, every life is an individual. And so having this kind of mixture of, I am like the greatest hitman assassin in the world, but also they understand the importance of a life. And so they know what they're doing when they do it. And they're not just one of those people who kind of shut those assassins that kind of shut themselves off to what they're doing and just like, it's just a job, man. Like, they understand the severity of killing and taking a life.
Yeah, well, and then if you wanted to also to introduce this type of thing into a campaign with that kind of idea that you just mentioned, is maybe they perform some sort of sacred ritual after killing each person, because it's setting the individual free from the burdens of life, and so they perform these rituals. And so the party can find these little ritual spots that have occurred or have happened, kind of slowly linking them to this group of people that are individuals. It's kind of gross,
but what I was thinking is they have these small candles and they kind of light them on, they kind of place them on the victim's closed eyes, and they kind of seal it shut as it burns.
Yeah, I mean, you could do all sorts of cool stuff with any kind of weird ritual or marking, or even like carving on a body or something, which is also gross, but like...
Yeah, it's that's a bit rough.
Yeah, but it would be a fun way to slowly like integrate it into your world, where they start seeing these kind of like weird things that happen throughout the society.
Yeah.
I think that'd be really fun, and it's so different than what we've seen really in D&D, which is all community-based.
Yeah, the individualist, man, that's an interesting one. That's a fun one. I mean, that's cool. How would is there any like initiation that you can think of for an individualist? Would it just be
No, it would probably they just start following the tenets of whatever the philosopher set forward for their individualism. And because I like them being like this weird order of assassins and, crazy wizards, but it just like adds to the non-structure that is their society.
Yeah.
Just there is no ceremony to welcome them into the fold. There is no test. It is you just start becoming an individual. And then these individuals, like any kind of radical belief, these individuals become radical and start killing people to free them from the tyranny that is.
Yeah, I was giving you my next question. Do you think they would be immediately, like, they think that killing the leadership and kind of crippling the group is immediately their reaction? Is that the group's goal from a beginning of individualism? Or does it kind of become that? Or is that only a few radicals that do that? How does that work?
I mean, you could make it any which way you wanted, really. You could, I mean, if you wanted it to be so radical that if they see a group they kill it, you could, but I think that'd be a little bit unrealistic. I don't think a lot of people, I don't think people who follow those ideologies would necessarily do that.
Yeah, no one's that crazy. No one's asking for death that much that they won't do any research. They just kill.
Yeah, I think that's a little too much, unless there was something that's affecting their mind or some sort of magic, or, even a god that's influencing them and they don't know it, which could be a fun plot twist where these individuals are actually being corrupted and or like, I can't think, I was going to say haunted, but yeah, like corrupted by this entity that is turning them to do these things, to start destroying the world. So you could play it that way. I even like the idea of, because they're so individualistic and so freedom of their bonds and hierarchies, that they kill people for them to experience the ultimate form of individualism and freedom.
So
the ultimate form of freedom,
the ultimate form of freedom, your death.
Yeah. So you're freed from
of
everything.
The group of your earthly body.
Yeah. So then you could even form like a weird group who, yes, they're a group.
Weird death group.
But they are killing individuals so they can experience the ultimate form of freedom. And it's worth our sacrifice to becoming this group so that everybody can experience this. And they could be horribly mangled and scarred because they've done so much horrible things to experience freedom from their body, like mutilation to their bodies and piercings, and like they've just scarred and ruined their body.
Trying to separate their brain from their bodies is like not physically
themselves,
but like but by tormenting the body in such a way that they kind of gain this tolerance for
feel
pain
this
and
freedom,
this kind of numbness.
Yeah.
So they feel free from the feelings of the body. And maybe those people even made a deal with a demon or something to kind of further that and free their body in some way.
Yeah, which would be a really fun campaign idea too. That for they're fighting this group of people who believe the ultimate form of freedom is releasing you from this earth by killing you. And that could be a pretty big arc, if not a campaign.
Yeah, I think this is one of the great things that comes from this. Just really thinking in depthly on anything, just focusing on this group, and eventually you come up with weird split off factions within this group, and we've just already come up with a really cool campaign just based on this one group.
Yeah, and it also is kind of like, I think it'd be a fun one because it's super kind of unnerving. It's creepy.
It's very creepy. Yes.
Yeah, like it'd be an interesting playthrough, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think they would have things like soul cages and stuff for people that they deemed unworthy of reaching that afterlife, reaching the freedom. Your soul will still be kept in a cage, in a group.
Yeah, you're like, if they deemed you unworthy to experience the freedom that is death, they keep you trapped forever.
And that would be a cool thing to find as the party, finding this place of just all of these souls trapped in cages, like this soul cage spell, or them literally like telling you at one point that you have now done enough against them that you have now been deemed unworthy of death.
Yeah,
you're like, I don't even know what that means, but I'm scared. I don't even worthy for death.
That's it's like that's a wild group of people. And then, I mean, if you wanted to, you could even just do like a small group of people who believe in individualism. So like they believe in individual, like a small individual group. So you can have these little like communes, these little societies that are dotted around that follow these tenets as well. But they haven't taken them as far as, becoming horrible assassins, ultimate freedom is death. So you just have these little communities that, farm or, do all sorts of stuff that are spread about, that wouldn't take it to as extreme. Because every philosophy, every religion has this group of extremists, So just have like a few groups of communities that don't do that, but instead they just prize their family, the individuals that are their families, that type of stuff.
Yeah, I really like the idea of this as like a character. I keep going back to that, I know. But like the idea of like, I was raised by a father who was an individualist, and then he kind of has this like, okay, you're 15, bye, kicks you out of the house, like, you got to be your own individual now.
Yeah.
And you just, that is your entrance to the world of just like, I was trained and then I was kicked out. Had to do it.
Yeah, I think that'd be a super fun character.
Yeah.
And it'd be fun party dynamic.
And then maybe that character even has doubts, but they still like live that way, and you could just have all these fun story points with your character.
Yeah, I would just advise for anybody wanting to do that is that you'd have to just be careful about that you wouldn't be too like edgelordy and like, I refuse to work with the party because I'm an individualist. So you'd have to be like somebody who's like processing or their belief system.
Yes, that's more what I was thinking is like the person was doubting themselves, and so they're like, I'll just try this group, I guess. I'm being hired as a mercenary, so we'll do this for now. Yeah,
but it would be a really fun idea to run, even as just being a player or an NPCs. It'd be really fun to do.
Yeah, it would. Well, I think that was another episode in the bag.
Yeah, another one done.
Episode 7, another one bites the dust.
Another one bites the dust. Josh, I've been thinking that, I'm starting to turn into an individualist, so I think you're going to have to leave the podcast.
Oh, man, have fun editing these. Oh, man.
And,
I'll be glad to be done with editing.
Yeah, and the more that I jump into this, I'm just thinking that, the ultimate form of freedom is if I were to kill you.
See you Wednesday, Aaron.
Yep.
Here we come. Individualist versus individualist. Who gets true freedom?
Yeah. Hey, that could be the way that they figure out their hierarchy structures.
Like an individualist gladiator. Or maybe even an individualist gladiatorial arena. Like it's just run by an individualist, and so it is a to the death arena because it is an individualist
bloodbath. Everyone for themselves,
and so they don't even say like, oh, it's to the death. All you know is it is the individualist arena, and that's it. And so everybody just kind of knows, and the party might go in and be like, oh, I want to fight in an arena. I haven't fought in an arena before, and then they don't know it's to the death.
Yeah. It would also work so well with that idea of death is the ultimate freedom, because then that person is creating this whole arena where he's letting people experience the freedom that is death.
Oh yeah. Oh
constantly.
Yes. That was exactly what I was thinking. Yes. It's creepy, so but also wild. You could have this. He could even be like a super creepy person that runs this arena.
Yeah. Just with this idea alone, you could do so much random cool stuff with it and you could take it to varying levels of extreme, from all sorts of crazy to, a somewhat moderate stance on it. So you could do all sorts of stuff with that.
Yeah. Well, I did start the end, so we should probably end. I did start saying the ending. We're wrapping up now. Well, thank you for listening to episode 7 of Dungeoneered. If you're listening to any wow, I'm gonna do that again. If you listen to us on any Aaron, kind of do a second take. If you listen to us on any podcasting service that has a rate and review, please rate and review. It would be nice to get some more listeners in. Thank you for sticking around. See you next time.
Bye.
There we go.